Nietzsche and Psychology, How to Become Who You Are, Awaken Your True Self. In a world where surface appearances often mask inner turmoil, Nietzsche dared to dive into the depths of the human soul. His insights were not merely philosophical reflections but urgent calls to confront our own chaos, reclaim forgotten strengths, and forge a self that is truly our own. This video invites you into a profound journey through Nietzsche's vision, a path that challenges, inspires, and awakens. If you've ever felt lost in your own mind, overwhelmed by contradictions, or disconnected from your true self, stay with us. Together, we will uncover how understanding our inner darkness, mastering our instincts, and patiently sculpting our soul can lead to the deepest freedom. This is not a journey for the faint-hearted, but for those who seek to live with depth, power, and authenticity. Let's begin. Nietzsche and his bold declaration about psychology. In 1888, as his writing career entered its final yet most brilliant phase, Friedrich Nietzsche left behind a declaration that could not be ignored. In his autobiography Ecce Homo, he wrote, "A psychologist without equal speaks from my writings. This is perhaps the first insight that a good reader might gain." Nietzsche did not merely claim himself a philosopher, but also the first great psychologist, a pioneer exploring territories of the human mind that had never before been traversed. At first glance, such an assertion may seem arrogant. Yet, looking back, it is hard to deny the truth that towering figures like Sigmund Freud, Carl Jung, and Alfred Adler, the three pillars of 20th-century psychology, were profoundly influenced by Nietzsche. His psychological analyses, though not yet systematized into a theory like Freud's or Jung's, laid the groundwork for a new understanding of the human mind, far ahead of his time. For Nietzsche, the exploration of psychology was never a cold, detached exercise of reason. He rejected knowledge that served merely as dry instruction. In his essay on the use and abuse of history for life, Nietzsche quoted Goethe, "I hate everything that merely instructs me without directly or immediately invigorating my activity." For Nietzsche, knowledge had to be a living energy, something that served the elevation of the self. Thus, Nietzsche's psychological investigations were not aimed at satisfying idle curiosity. They pursued a specific, ambitious goal: to uncover how one becomes who one is, the very promise he chose as the subtitle for Ecce Homo. In The Gay Science, he stressed, "What does your conscience say? You shall become the person you are." These words did not merely lay the foundation of Nietzsche's philosophy but opened up a difficult path that few dare to follow. The journey back to one's authentic self, hidden beneath layers of social conventions, fears, and self-deception. In his boldness and pain, Nietzsche himself embarked on that path. Through his own experience, he left behind a unique legacy of psychology, not as a rigid academic system, but as a profound call, inviting each individual to confront themselves and to become an explorer in the chaotic world of the soul. Daring to face the depths of the soul, a journey not for the many. Throughout the history of philosophy, countless thinkers have tried to understand the human mind. They sought the laws governing behavior, the patterns underlying emotions, and explanations for humanity's contradictory existence. Yet Nietzsche argued that all these efforts fell prey to a fundamental error: they were blinded by deeply ingrained moral prejudices and, more seriously, by a fear of exploring the darkness within themselves. In Beyond Good and Evil, Nietzsche bluntly declared, "All psychology up to now has got stuck in moral prejudices and fears. It has not dared to descend into the depths." According to Nietzsche, the human mind is not a smooth, easily observable surface. It is a layered, complex structure where layers of psychic shells accumulate, where the deep unconscious operates according to rules that surface consciousness cannot control. Influenced by Heraclitus, the pre-Socratic philosopher, Nietzsche believed that the soul was like an endless river, with no shore or boundary to be found. Heraclitus wrote, "If you search for the soul, you will not find its limits, even if you travel every path, so deep is its measure. Nietzsche echoed this spirit, asserting that man can never fully grasp himself. Even if one were to peel away 70 times 7 layers of masks, there would still be no guarantee of reaching the true core. Rather than daring to delve deeper, most people choose to live on the surface. They busy themselves with social performances and daily trivialities, while avoiding any confrontation with the abyss inside. Nietzsche observed that they are industriously mindful of the common comedy, but completely indifferent to themselves. Nietzsche chose another path. He voluntarily embarked on a journey which, in his own words, not everyone is allowed to undertake. In the preface to The Dawn, he wrote, "I descended into the depths, I bored into the foundations." This was not merely an artistic flourish, it was the solemn vow of a soul adventurer, ready to endure loneliness, terror, and collapse in order to uncover the truth about himself. From the outset, Nietzsche drew a stark boundary. The quest for the true self is not for the many. It demands extraordinary courage, not only to confront the external world, but more importantly, to face the monster lurking within one's own heart. When exploring the inner world also means stepping into danger. Nietzsche did not romanticize the journey of inner exploration. He never deceived anyone into thinking that venturing deep within one's self would be safe or easy. On the contrary, he admitted frankly that descending into the chaotic depths of the mind entailed real dangers, not merely vague fears, but hazards capable of destroying a person. For Nietzsche, plunging into the abyss of the self was an adventure that not everyone should or could undertake. Deep within each human being dwell wild forces, monstrous elements of the conscience, storms of emotions and instincts yet to be tamed. Those who lack sufficient courage and clarity may find no way back once they confront these forces. In a chilling warning, Nietzsche depicted the explorer of the soul as a lone traveler entering a labyrinth, with no map, no signs. He can easily lose his way among countless forks and be torn apart by the minotaurs lurking in the shadowy depths of conscience. Death here is not always physical, but may be the complete collapse of the mind, a fragmentation invisible to the outside world. For Nietzsche, the risk of madness was no distant fantasy for those who dared to dig deep. This reality did not deter him, but he recognized that the majority of people would choose to avoid it. Thus, he affirmed that only certain exceptional souls, endowed with immense inner strength and boundless courage, could venture down that path without being destroyed. For these individuals, however, exploring the inner world was not a mere choice but a necessity. Their minds, racked with contradictions, conflicts, and internal abysses, would otherwise tear them apart from within. They must descend, must confront, must reach into the deepest darkness in search of a guiding light. Nietzsche did not romanticize darkness, nor did he glorify madness. But he revealed a stark truth: sometimes, to truly live, one must risk collapse by confronting the very things that threaten to destroy them. There is no easy road to awakening. Only those willing to pay the price, even if that price is their own mental fate, will have the chance to truly meet themselves. Self-creation amidst inner chaos. Some souls carry within themselves a chaos deeper than that of others. Nietzsche recognized that while most people could live their entire lives on the surface, a small minority could not escape the tumult boiling within. Their inner world is a battlefield of relentless conflicts, abysses, and shadows that cannot be ignored. If they do not consciously face and reconstruct themselves, these forces will inevitably drag them down, causing them to shatter silently from within. For these unruly souls, the journey is not merely one of exploration but of creation. They are compelled to act, to reorganize the broken fragments of their being, to summon all their strength to sculpt themselves into a cohesive whole capable of enduring existence. This is not achieved by suppressing or eliminating the warring forces, but by reconciling, arranging, and synthesizing them into a living, sustainable unity. Nietzsche found a model for this journey in Goethe. He admired Goethe not only for his artistic genius but for living his life as a self-created work of art. What he sought was wholeness. Nietzsche wrote. He disciplined himself toward totality, he created himself. In Nietzsche's eyes, Goethe did not surrender to inner chaos. He did not flee from the diversity of emotions and instincts but tamed them, building from them a resilient, harmonious, and powerful self. Yet Nietzsche also emphasized that self-creation does not mean molding oneself arbitrarily. Man cannot fashion himself out of nothingness. Within each of us already lies a profound essence. A spiritual destiny, a granite-like foundation that cannot be shattered. It is upon this unchangeable basis that the process of self-creation must unfold. Thus, self-creation is the art of discerning one's limits, recognizing latent powers, understanding internal contradictions. And then using everything, both light and darkness, to build a life that is not merely about survival, but about radiant existence in one's unique way. Nietzsche never portrayed this path as easy. He made no promises that everyone could succeed. But he left behind a truth for the brave, even in the midst of chaos, in the fractures and scars. There remains the possibility of creating something beautiful, powerful, and truly worthy. Inner destiny, when the deepest nature calls your name. In his exploration of the soul, Nietzsche rejected the notion that man could arbitrarily become whatever he wished. He dismissed the illusion of an empty self that could be molded freely by willpower. Instead, he insisted that deep within each individual lies something immutable, a foundational essence, a spiritual destiny that no act of will can fully alter. Nietzsche referred to this as the granite block of personal fate. It is not something easily perceived on the surface, but the silent, unwavering answer to life's most fundamental questions. When faced with life's greatest dilemmas, despite all attempts at concealment or evasion, the voice within, "This is truly who I am," will inevitably rise from the depths. This nature is not shaped solely by personal experiences or biological inheritance. Nietzsche believed it was also forged by great historical forces, traditions, cultures, and human experiments spanning millennia. These deep memories have not vanished, they continue to live within each modern individual, permeating our minds through unconscious channels. In Nietzsche's view, the modern human is like a turbulent flow of layered cultures, conflicting impulses, and distant, unnamed memories. Beneath the surface of everyday life lies a restless chaos. A vast inheritance we both carry and struggle to comprehend. Ironically, most people today live as though this past does not exist. They imagine themselves as entirely free beings, rootless and historyless. Yet it is precisely this rupture that causes them to feel lost, to experience life as meaningless, adrift as if thrown into an alien world. Nietzsche argued that only by becoming conscious of one's inner destiny, by listening to the silent call from the depths of one's nature, could a person begin the true journey of becoming oneself. This is not a journey of arbitrary creation, but one of discovery, recognition, and construction built upon the firmest foundation of the soul. Not every path is meant for you. Not every model of success in the world belongs to you. For at the deepest core of your being, certain answers have long been written. What is required is not to strive to become someone else, but to have the courage to become the person you were always meant to be. The past never sleeps within our souls. Nietzsche believed that to understand oneself, one cannot simply observe the soul as it is in the present. Beneath the modern veneer, within each of us, flow the ancient currents of history, of bygone cultures, of humanity's countless experiments. He wrote that the past of every form of life, every culture that once existed and perished, still moves silently within the mind of modern humanity. We are not merely products of personal experience but a chaotic amalgamation of countless inheritances we are often unaware of. Nietzsche read to modern souls as chaotic souls, where historical streams intertwine and clash endlessly. Thus, Nietzsche asserted that direct observation of oneself in the present is insufficient for true self-knowledge. Without seeing through the seeds sown by history within us, we remain lost in disconnection, feeling our lives to be adrift, absurd, as if thrown randomly into the world. In an early essay, On the Use and Abuse of History for Life, Nietzsche warned of the condition of peoples and individuals who have lost connection with history. He described them as falling into a restless state, chasing novelty after novelty, never truly feeling rooted in life. In contrast, Nietzsche celebrated those who possessed a historical sense, those who knew themselves as the continuation of a long process, as flowers blooming from ancient soils. For them, existence is no longer a weary accident but a living expression of a past still breathing and creating through them. Nietzsche further emphasized that not only human history but even prehistoric eras, and the stages of animal evolution, have left their marks on our beings. The human body, bearing remnants from ancient times, is a testament to a past that never truly vanished. Likewise, our minds, in their deepest layers, still carry the echoes of primal instincts, of fears, desires, and urges that once shaped life at its dawn. Nietzsche showed that to truly understand ourselves, we must dig through layers of time, trace the underground rivers of history, and reconnect with the deep sources our modern consciousness has tried to forget. Only by knowing who we are within this grand current can we find the strength to live a life with real meaning, rootedness, and true depth. Prehistoric drives, the wild heritage within our minds. Nietzsche did not stop at pointing out the flow of human history within the modern mind. He delved even deeper, down to the oldest strata of human existence, where prehistoric drives still silently endure, even though they have been masked by the consciousness of civilization. Just as the human body retains traces of ancient evolutionary stages, our mind, according to Nietzsche, still carries primal instincts that once enabled our ancestors to survive in harsh environments. These primitive impulses have not died. They continue to smolder beneath the surface, hidden beneath the masks of reason and morality. Nietzsche emphasized that no matter how refined or civilized a person may appear externally, at the deepest layers of being, they are still a primordial creature. In moments when instinct erupts, uncontrollable anger, overwhelming cravings, or intense fear, we catch a glimpse of the beast within that Zarathustra once warned of. However, instead of encouraging the repression or annihilation of these wild instincts, Nietzsche proposed a different view. They are not merely remnants to be eliminated. If properly harnessed, these primal energies could become a tremendous source of strength, invigorating life. Nietzsche pointed out that the prevailing trend of modern society, the attempt to completely eradicate strong emotions and violent instincts, is not only short-sighted but dangerous. Like a river, improperly dammed that might burst and cause devastation, repressed energies in the human soul will eventually erupt in twisted and destructive forms. Instead, Nietzsche suggested another path. Rather than drying up the torrents of the soul, we must learn to transform and channel them toward higher purposes. Just as wild rivers, when skillfully managed, can become powerful sources of energy, primal instincts, if properly directed, can strengthen the creative will and the journey of self-creation. For Nietzsche, hidden within the wild chaos of prehistoric drives lies an untapped treasure. By confronting and mastering these deepest parts of ourselves, we can truly ascend to heights we never knew we could reach. Taming the wild instincts, unleashing hidden strength. Nietzsche believed that within every human being exist powerful streams of energy, torrents of emotions and wild instincts inherited from pre-historic times. Among these are impulses that may seem dangerous, the lust for power, unbridled desire, raging anger. But instead of viewing these as forces to be eradicated, Nietzsche proposed a different perspective. We should see them as living forces, to be transformed and redirected rather than suppressed to the point of exhaustion. According to Nietzsche, the common mindset of modern society, the attempt to annihilate all wild energies, is one of its greatest mistakes. When we deny or repress these primal parts of ourselves, they do not vanish. They retreat into the shadows, accumulating until they explode in distorted and uncontrollable ways. Nietzsche compared these wild impulses to raging rivers. If we learn how to harness, guide, and channel them, they can become immense sources of vitality, fueling creativity and the will to live. But if we try to forcibly block them, it is akin to building a fragile dam against rising floodwaters. Sooner or later, everything will burst apart. In modern life, many people strive to project an image of rationality and safety. They hide strong emotions, conceal primal desires. Yet deep down, it is these hidden parts that generate true vitality. Those who attempt to control themselves by denial alone often fall into a state of emptiness, fatigue, and existential disorientation. Nietzsche urged each individual to master their inner energies, not by rejecting them, nor by letting them dominate, but by entering into a dialogue with them, understanding them, and channeling them toward greater goals. A person who can transform anger into courage, desire into creativity, pain into willpower, will become far stronger than someone who merely suppresses or denies these forces. True freedom, according to Nietzsche, does not come from becoming emotionless or pure in a social sense. It comes from the ability to manage even the darkest, wildest parts of oneself. In the unity between reason and instinct, between light and shadow, humanity finds its true strength, integrity, and the profound joy of fully living. The divine instinct, the forgotten companion within. Nietzsche did not speak only of wild instincts carrying the potential for destruction. In the deepest layers of the soul, he also recognized the presence of another force, mysterious yet equally powerful, the divine instincts, unconscious powers that once helped humanity survive and thrive in the harshest epochs. Nietzsche believed that before modern humans developed rational consciousness, our distant ancestors lived by relying on sophisticated, enduring instincts, nearly infallible reactions in life-or-death situations. These instincts did not operate through lengthy reasoning but through a deep intelligence, an innate sensitivity, an immediate integration with the flow of life. Nietzsche referred to these forces as the divine animal within each person. They represent regulating instincts, faultless intuitions, and survival powers that required no mediation by thought. Yet with the rise of civilization and the dominance of reason, modern humans have increasingly severed their connection with this priceless treasure. Today, most of us navigate life through a frail and fallible consciousness. Nietzsche regarded consciousness as the weakest and most fallible organ of humanity when facing sudden crises or complex decisions. Instead of trusting the intuitive strength that once safeguarded their ancestors, modern individuals often falter, hesitate, and sink into helplessness. Nietzsche lamented that instead of occasionally relinquishing control and allowing instinct to guide when reason fails, modern humans have learned to distrust themselves. They fear their instincts, fear the voices arising from the depths of their being, and thus cut themselves off from one of their most powerful sources of survival. This loss of connection not only weakens personal life but leaves individuals vulnerable, disoriented, and living without the natural wisdom or flexibility needed to face life's challenges. Nietzsche did not call for the abandonment of reason, but he reminded us that to live fully, humans must learn to listen to and reconnect with the divine animal within. Instinct is not an enemy. If we trust it and harmonize with it, we can reclaim the primal strength that once enabled humanity not only to survive but to rise and flourish through the most unforgiving epochs of history. The mind, a chaotic city in need of creation. In Nietzsche's view, the human mind is not a unified, solid entity as many philosophers before him believed. On the contrary, it is a chaotic entity, a crowded city where countless drives, instincts, emotions, and wills collide and constantly battle for dominance. Nietzsche described the mind as a social structure of drives and effects, where internal forces continuously forge alliances, betray one another, and vie for control. Amidst these underground currents of conflict, there is not always a single sovereign self directing everything. Instead, personal identity is the temporary result of endless negotiations between countless inner voices. This was a bold and radically different perspective from the idealized notion of the self as a pure, unitary essence. Nietzsche saw within human beings a multiplicity of instincts, a miniature society where peace is only a fragile, fleeting state, and chaos is the enduring reality. Thus, Nietzsche did not call for eliminating internal conflicts, that would be impossible. Rather, he set a more challenging task. How to create a new order within the chaotic city of the mind. How to gather scattered forces, how to coordinate conflicting drives without eradicating inner diversity. Without this effort, Nietzsche warned, a person would remain internally divided, perpetually torn apart, incapable of achieving wholeness. They would be pulled in opposite directions by contradictory desires, tossed back and forth between conflicting goals, ultimately losing the ability to shape a purposeful life. Nietzsche saw in the coordination of this inner chaos the highest art, the art of self-mastery. It is the ability to organize one's inner world not by denial or repression, but through subtle discernment, through finding a core principle that can link, harmonize, and guide all internal forces toward a greater goal. In a world where distraction is easy and people are torn apart by immediate urges, Nietzsche reminded us that only those who can build an ordered inner city can truly live freely, powerfully, and deeply. And that project, the creation of oneself, is the greatest work any individual can undertake in life. Searching for the organizing idea, the quiet flame guiding your life. Amidst the chaos of the mind, amidst countless forces vying for control, Nietzsche believed there was a way out. Not by forcibly suppressing conflicts, but by seeking and empowering an organizing idea, a central drive capable of uniting all scattered energies toward a singular direction. Nietzsche called this the dominant passion, the living idea that quietly grows in the depths of each soul. It is not something one can arbitrarily choose by sheer will. Nor can it be summoned at the command of reason. Instead, it naturally forms and gradually reveals itself through life experiences, through struggles, collisions, and sometimes even through painful losses. This organizing idea, according to Nietzsche, does not emerge hastily. It accumulates strength silently, little by little, like a seed taking root deep in the soil, patiently preparing for the day it bursts forth with vibrant life. Quietly, it builds the necessary qualities, sharpens skills, selects crucial experiences, so that one day, when it is strong enough, it will rise to rule the whole being. Nietzsche described this process vividly. At first, we think we are wandering down side roads, wasting our energy on trivial goals. Yet all these experiences are quietly accumulating, preparing us for a greater task that we are not yet aware of. Only those who know how to patiently listen and wait can recognize the call of their organizing idea. It will not be a loud shout. It is a quiet, persistent flame, guiding each decision, each choice, each twist of the journey. Once the organizing idea awakens, it gradually brings all scattered forces into coordination, turning chaos into order, diversity into unity. It allows a person to act with an unprecedented focus and strength, for all parts of their being are aligned toward a supreme purpose. Nietzsche did not promise this path would be easy, but he affirmed that only those who find their organizing idea can live a truly profound life, a life not torn apart by internal contradictions, but guided by an inner fire that never dies. Sculpting oneself, the journey of shaping the self. Nietzsche rejected the illusion that one could find an authentic self simply by stripping away layers of social masks. To him, we are not like preformed statues covered in dust, waiting to be revealed. Rather, we are like raw, unshaped blocks of stone, needing to be carved, molded, and created through deliberate effort. Nietzsche wrote, "It is an illusion to believe that we will find ourselves after having gotten rid of or forgotten certain things. To make oneself, to shape a form from chaotic elements, that is the task. The task of a sculptor. The task of a creative human being. Thus, the journey of becoming oneself is not a passive process of uncovering some hidden essence. It is a continuous act of creation, requiring discernment, willpower, and the courage to confront one's own limits and contradictions. Within the raw block of the self coexist conflicts, imperfections, and opposing instincts. The task of the self-sculptor is not to erase everything that seems inconvenient, but to deeply accept the whole material, and from there, select, polish, and arrange it into a form that has meaning and vitality. No one is born complete. No one is handed a perfect blueprint for life. Each person must carve out their own path, build their own values, create the inner architecture of their soul from experience, from suffering, from failures and unfinished dreams. Nietzsche emphasized that self-creation is not a one-time act. It is a living, dynamic process that lasts a lifetime and demands extraordinary perseverance. The true self-sculptor is the one who never gives up, who tirelessly nurtures the inner flame even when the external world seeks to extinguish it. It is through this persistence, through carving, failing, repairing, and rebuilding, that a person touches the deepest freedom. Not the freedom of escaping all constraints, but the freedom of being truly oneself, a self forged through genuine effort, unyielding determination, and endless creativity. Nietzsche placed a tremendous challenge before every individual: stop waiting for an innate, pre-existing self to be discovered. Take up the chisel and hammer, and begin shaping yourself. For it is only through this process, through every patient and courageous strike, that we truly find the form of who we are. A form no one can give us, but one we must birth with our own hands and will. Nietzsche and the foretold tragedy, when the enlightener could not save himself, despite leaving behind a body of thought that profoundly shook humanity. Nietzsche's personal fate ended in tragedy. At the age of 44, he fell into a severe mental breakdown, a state from which he never recovered for the rest of his life. To many, his collapse poses a haunting question: how could someone who dared to explore the depths of the mind like Nietzsche not save himself? How could a spiritual pioneer be engulfed by his own inner world? Nietzsche acknowledged the tragedy of his life with a strange clarity. In unpublished notes, he wrote, "There is a false saying. How can someone who cannot save himself save others? Suppose I hold the key to your chains, why must your lock and mine be the same?" Here, Nietzsche touched on a painful but profound truth. The ability to guide others does not equate to the ability to save oneself. Every soul is its own labyrinth, every personal tragedy is a battle that no one else can fight in another's place. In some sense, Nietzsche had foretold his own downfall through his analysis of the dangers inherent in inner exploration. He knew that those who dare to dig deep into darkness always risk being devoured by it. He understood that venturing into the chaotic depths of the soul demands not only courage but often great sacrifice. Yet, his personal collapse does not diminish the value of what Nietzsche left behind. On the contrary, it lends his words a special gravity, the weight of someone who lived what he taught, who personally undertook the perilous journey he invited others to embark upon. Nietzsche did not speak from a position of safety or detachment. He was a true traveler of the inner world. Someone who tasted ultimate loneliness, profound inner conflict, and an irredeemable fall. Thus, his words are not mere philosophical musings but living traces of a real spiritual journey. If Nietzsche teaches us anything through his own fate, it is this inescapable truth. The journey into the depths of the self is filled with danger. Yet it is only through this journey that one can touch the deepest freedom, living a life no longer bound by illusions, fear, and self-deception. And though this enlightener collapsed along his path, the flame he ignited continues to burn in the minds of those brave enough to follow, those unwilling to settle for easy answers, those still yearning to find their true being in a chaotic world. The journey of healing, true beginning when facing the darkness. Nietzsche showed that the journey inward is not merely about understanding, but also about healing. For what we reject, the deep layers of wounds, instincts, and ancient memories, do not vanish simply through forgetting. They continue to operate silently, shaping how we live, how we love, and how we suffer. Only by daring to look directly into our inner darkness can we truly begin the journey of healing. Not by eliminating the weak or wild parts of ourselves, but by acknowledging, embracing, and taming them. Healing, in Nietzsche's spirit, is not about becoming perfect. It is about achieving wholeness, when the light and darkness within us no longer wage war, but coexist, uplift, and enrich our lives. And through this process, we can reclaim the primal strength that had long lain dormant within us. Understanding others. Understanding life, lessons from chaotic depths. Nietzsche believed that to truly understand others, one cannot stop at observing surface behaviors or words. Every human being, like ourselves, is a chaotic inner city, a place where countless instincts, drives, and past memories intertwine and clash endlessly. Understanding others, therefore, is not merely about agreement or judgment. It is about recognizing that within each person lies unfathomable depths, shadows they themselves are still struggling to comprehend. Their outbursts, misdirections, repeated mistakes, all may originate from unconscious forces they have yet to confront. Nietzsche reminded us that the external world mirrors the internal one. When we see chaos, conflict, or confusion in others, it is also a chance to recognize the unresolved chaos within ourselves. Thus, understanding life is no longer about expecting a perfect world. It is about accepting reality as it is, complex, layered, and ever-changing. And through this deep understanding, true compassion can be born, not a pity from above, but a profound empathy between souls struggling together toward wholeness. Building inner strength, mastering the self from within. For Nietzsche, true power does not come from exerting control over the external world but from the ability to regulate the world within oneself. When a person can harmonize the conflicting forces in their mind, when they can establish order in their chaotic inner city, deep inner strength naturally arises. Building inner strength, therefore, is not an external display, but a quiet process of self-mastery. It is the ability to remain calm amid emotional storms. It is the capacity to listen to the conflicting voices within without letting them blindly dictate action. Nietzsche believed that one who can master himself needs no mastery over others. Such a person becomes a stable center in a world of turbulence, a light that the storm cannot extinguish. But achieving this requires extraordinary patience. Mastery of the self is not about repressing emotions or denying natural desires, it is about leading, shaping, and using that energy for higher and more meaningful goals. Building inner strength is learning to master the raging river within, not to be swept away by it, but also not to let it dry up. It is the hardest art, yet the very foundation for living a truly resilient and free life. Dispelling misunderstandings, psychology is not only for the weak. One of the greatest misunderstandings Nietzsche observed was the association of psychology with weakness. Many believe that only he wounded and the lost need to look inward. But in Nietzsche's view, the truth is quite the opposite, it is the strongest souls who dare to gaze deeply within. True psychology is not a refuge for those fleeing life. It is the battlefield for those who are dissatisfied with superficiality, those who long to understand themselves fully and to live with the entire force of their being. Understanding oneself is not about surrendering to wounds, it is about transforming them into fuel for growth. Those who dare to face their inner darkness, instead of evading it, are the ones silently forging themselves for greater journeys. Nietzsche believed that in society, most people choose to live on the surface because depth demands courage. Thus, those who venture into the inner world, who dare to understand the unconscious forces operating within them, are not weaker, they are, in truth, far stronger than the world often imagines. Awakening the inner self, when you no longer fear yourself. By delving into the mind. Nietzsche realized that humanity's greatest enemy is not the external world, but the fear within, the fear of facing one's own chaos, conflicting drives, and unnamed shadows. But he also pointed to a profound truth: when we stop fighting ourselves, when we dare to look directly at all our imperfections without judgment or denial, an awakening occurs. We realize that darkness is not the enemy. It is simply part of the process of becoming whole. Nietzsche taught that true inner maturity lies not in eliminating fear, but in walking through it, allowing the true self, with all its light and darkness, to emerge. Then, we no longer live in opposition to ourselves. We begin to live as an integrated whole, strong and free. Thus, awakening the inner self is not an external change. It is a profound reconciliation with all the parts of ourselves we once sought to deny. And in that reconciliation, we discover what Nietzsche called true strength, the strength of a soul that knows who it is and no longer fears itself.